Hey guys, just wanted to welcome you back for another video. And I figured while I was at it here today, I would just go ahead and give kind of a breakdown of how I work batch card making. And with this method, it doesn't matter if I am doing 2 or 20 or 100 or whatever the amount may be. Having this method has really helped me be able to kick cards out quickly if I need to, or get a lot ready to go when we're in the middle of craft show season and I need to refill my stock. So this first few parts, what you'll see is me cutting everything apart. And again, I also cut apart the cut apart sheets to help build either the matting layers or the focal points. So I just kind of go in layers. So when I'm done with this section of cutting everything apart to get down to what I want to work with to build up the backgrounds, then I start putting them together to see how do I want them to look on top of each other, like how do I want my layers to go. And then the final part of the prep, I will go through and use either a combination of double-sided tape and glue, or I'll just use double-sided tape for all the layers. It all depends on the kind of paper that I'm using. Typically on my bottom layers, meaning the ones that are going to be attached directly to the card base, I tend to want to use double-sided tape. This way it keeps glue from showing through on the inside, or any wrinkling. If I apply too much, then it makes the cardstock wet, and sometimes you can see that on the inside of the card. So to avoid that, typically my bottom layer, the very bottom layer, will be attached using a double-sided tape. So that's the thought process behind these initial steps for getting everything ready, is again, cutting down the cardstock to the sizes that I want to use, cutting apart any cut aparts that I want to use. Then I also go through and I kind of get a basic idea of how I want the layers to look. And then now you see here, I am going through and using double-sided tape. So I'm going to let music fill in while I'm working on this part of the process, and then I'll come back when I get to the next step. And just a note, for some of the repetitive sections, I went ahead and sped them up more, because otherwise this video would be extremely very long. If at any time you need to slow it down, you can always adjust the settings in the YouTube and take it down to 0.25% playback speed. At this point, what I'm also doing is, as I'm going through and putting the layers together again to start building up the base part of the card, this is where I'll generally make the decision if I'm going to distress the edges, because that is still one of my favorite looks to the edges of the paper, to kind of give it that grungy, vintagey kind of look. So that's what I'm doing here. Just a quick note, you can also come in on these bottom layers or the matting layers with a little bit of foam tape here and there if you want to build up dimension and add interest to your card project without it being too bulky or making it difficult for people to mail the cards. So again, you can use foam tape as a really good way to build up interest and add easy dimension to your cards. And I forgot to mention that roll that you see, that white roll down in the lower right-hand corner, that is my big roll of thin foam tape. That's the one that I think is the only one that I used throughout this whole project. Now that the bottom layers are all set and in place, then the next part of my process is I will come in and start picking out the focal points that I want to use. So for today's project, you can see primarily it's going to be the Tim Holtz paper dolls. And the one thing with these that I have to take a little extra time for is I need to make sure that I'm positioning any of the images or the paper dolls that look like they're either sitting or they look like they're resting their arm on something. This is the time where I'll go through and make sure that I've got them positioned correctly on the top of the card. And you can see I'll be doing a lot of moving around and kind of readjusting the positioning before I completely tack them down. But that's what this next part is just kind of getting the main focal point picked out and kind of get a mock-up of how is it going to look. You can see I started to clean up here. I was going to put the paper dolls away because I couldn't think of any of the others that I wanted to use. But then at the last bit that were left on the desk, I saw some really cute ones. So I pulled those back out and then decided to add them to the cards. After the focal points now are all set and in place on the card, this is the point that I will typically come in and start adding in the sentiments or the funny phrase or whatever it is that I'm adding. Sometimes I will stamp the sentiment right onto the card base. But again, most of the time, the sentiments will be put on after I have done the focal point. Sometimes, of course, depending on what I'm doing, sometimes I will do the sentiment first, then start building everything around that. But typically, what I'm doing today is pretty much my standard process. So now is the time that I'm adding the sentiments. And if I don't feel that they will fit on the front of the card, then I will move them into the inside or put them on the inside of the card, I should say. And the final part of the process, of course, would be the finishing phase, for lack of a better word. I try to keep this part, of course, to the very end, especially if I'm using Nuvo drops, because stuff like that has to dry. But what I use and how much is going to be dependent on the paper. Like if I have a plainer background, then I can get away with a few more embellishments. But a paper like the one that I'm using today is something where less would be more, if that makes sense. So I try to keep a lighter hand with the embellishments to finish it off, just so I don't overshadow either the paper or the focal point, which today, of course, is the paper dolls. And, it takes a while to get a rhythm. It took me a while when I got started making cards to kind of find which way to work helped me the most. And it's not that I don't still have moments where I'm overthinking or making mistakes or anything like that, but having the process has helped to reduce how often that happens, if that makes sense. That the frustration of overthinking and then ended up, basically effing up the whole project. That has gone down a lot since I kind of got my rhythm, like I said. So I really hope that this has helped kind of point you in a direction if that is something that you have also struggled with. And if it did help you, or if you found it interesting, drop me a purple heart in the comments and let me know. And in the meantime, thank you guys so much for hanging out. This really is just like the best community in the whole world. And I really appreciate being here with you. So be safe, take care, like I said, and I will definitely be seeing you in the next video. If you're interested in some more content, here's a couple videos you might want to check out, and I will catch up with you in the next one.